What if I told you your truest work might never trend, but it will transform you? Let's talk about what no one claps for yet shapes everything. Good day, everyone, and welcome to another creative episode. Welcome to my channel, Real Artist Studios. I am your artist in residence and happy to be here with you today. In today's video, I wanted to discuss a little bit more about art and at the same time, maybe reintroduce how the palette knife works and show you a demonstration in how to paint a portrait without a sketch, just pure steel blade on canvas. Now it's going to be an absolute cracker of a video. I'm not sure how many people are comfortable with painting portraits, but I certainly hope that you will find your nuggets in today's video and be able to utilize some ideas in your studio. Now the pressure to sell out is real. But I really didn't start painting to blend in or to be a sellout. I really started to paint to be free. And that kind of freedom, well, for me, that's just not for sale. I've had people say, you know, you could make more, be more if you just painted ... fill in the blank, whatever that is for you. But art for me isn't a product, it really is a portal. And every brush stroke holds the power to unlock something buried, something divine within you. As an artist, I'm really not here to be a performance, as we have much proof in our society, and something I think society has totally missed. I paint to unlock, firstly, my inner self, and then begin to dust that energy outwardly. There's an incredible amount of power, inner power, that comes with that knowledge. All right, so let's start painting a portrait with just the palette knife. You guys are all familiar with my favorite little palette knife. There it is there. Again, just a note, it has to have a kink in the handle. Otherwise, you're going to touch your fingers on the actual canvas, and that's just not going to work for anybody really. So if you're going to get a knife, make sure that you buy one with a bend in the handle. I've done a couple of videos around palette knives, how they work, using the figure 8 movement, different knives, different blades. This is my favorite one purely because I'm able to maneuver it with ease. It feels like it's an extension of my actual arm, so I don't feel like I'm holding it in my hand and it's foreign. So that's why I like using it. I also love the fact that it's got that bend, very important, and the size of the blade. Now, you have all asked me, a couple of different wonderful viewers have said, what is the size of your blade? I have no idea. I did measure it though, and that looks like it's a 4 centimeter length. But this here, the width of it is quite important. As I've mentioned before, you can see that it's got a bend on one of the sides. And the reason why it's got that bend is just overuse, basically. It doesn't come like that. It's quite straight normally. I've had this for quite some time. So for me, it's very hard to get a new tool. So I keep using this one. I've bought many in the past. Again, I've talked about them and what to look out for. But really, the bottom line is must have a bend in the handle. It must have an ergonomic feel, very flexible tip. If these actual blades are tough and hard, you'll find that you will get RSI in your wrist. So just be mindful. Having the right tool is very important. Okay, so let's get to painting a portrait from scratch using a palette knife, no drawing whatsoever. If you're not familiar with painting portraits, first step to be aware of is you have to understand proportion. Drawing is necessary. And then, of course, the third aspect of it is mixing the correct values. Now, why do I use a palette knife? Simply because I love painting wet into wet. And that for me adds a lot more emotion, movement, drama, texture, and I can manipulate the actual paint just like when you ice a cake, I suppose. I'm not sure if that's relevant, but that's what it feels like. Plainly put, it's painting wet into wet. So I love that sort of painting. Yes, it's great to have a drawing. Please do that if you feel comfortable. But the reason why I don't is because I love to manipulate the shapes as I go along. And that's just a lot more fun for me. It's a lot more dramatic. It's a lot more unknown. And I love exploring that. But again, if you feel comfortable, put a drawing in. Okay, let's get to it. Okay, so that was the blocking stage, or getting some of the darks in before we start any of the skin colors. What you saw me do there is really just use the tip of the steel blade, not the entire surface area of the steel blade. Be mindful that when you do, when you paint with the tip, you have a high chance of stabbing your canvas. So just be light-handed when you start to do that. When you start to apply the full blade, again, using the figure 8 motion, you'll feel a lot more comfortable. But because you're treating this as an initial drawing, then you're going to pierce that canvas very, very easily. So that's a really handy tip to do. I suppose that the process here is that once you start to use a palette knife, you need to almost have a feathery feel as you're painting, at the same time enough pressure that you get that paint on your canvas or piece of paper. If you don't, what you'll find is that you'll be scraping more paint off than what you're actually putting on. If I haven't said it enough already throughout all my videos, practice, practice, practice. Don't start with a portrait because it can be a little bit daunting. I've always advocated, even with students, start with a pear. Pear is a great initial step to paint to a portrait because it's got curves, it's got different values, reflective light and so forth. And then that will give you the experience in understanding how to contort, move your palette knife, how to have sharp edges, soft edges, etc. So just some tips along the way. But let's continue and start to put our next layers of paint on the canvas. When someone opens up to you or when a part of you cracks open, that's sacred. Our brush becomes the translator of that emotion, not for decoration, but for communion. You are being entrusted with sacred energy, not borrowed, not bought, entrusted. When someone shares their story, when they sit for a portrait for you, or when your own truth bubbles up through that silence, that's a transmission. And what you do with that matters. The art isn't just mixing pigment, it's listening, translating grief, joy, shame, memory into color and shape. And that's a sacred task, one that requires stillness, integrity, and the courage not to look away. The canvas becomes a mirror. And sometimes the first person who needs to face it is you. Most of my work sold either privately, commissions, and referrals. And this portrait changed me. It opened me. And someone bought it because it held their truth too. Now that's the kind of energy money can't fake. We've been conditioned to think that value comes from performance, from the applause, from the algorithm. but performance is fleeting. Truth, however, lingers. The art that comes from your deepest knowing, that work carries frequency, that work heals. You don't need to contort yourself to fit a market. Let the market bend toward your truth. Now, if someone pays for your art, they are not buying a product. They're investing in the resonance it awakens inside them. That's not performance, that's transmission. And its worth is everything. If you're painting in silence, keep going. If you've been told to dilute your truth, don't. You weren't called to create for applause. You were called to remember. And in remembering, you help others do the same. Your job as an artist is not to chase approval. Your job is to stay honest, especially when it's quiet. Because the world doesn't need any more performance. It needs people, brave people, to bleed colour onto canvas and say, this is real. So tell me, what have you painted that no one clapped for, but you knew deep inside it mattered? Okay, so that was a portrait demonstration using only the palette knife. It was quite a challenge, I got to tell you. I don't know if you've noticed, I did, but I had to correct one of the eyes. This is the peril of painting directly with the palette knife, by the way, that you will get your features sometimes a little bit distorted. But the positive of that is because you're painting wet into wet, you can simply scrape it off and add the layers back on and get things into proportion. The challenging aspect with painting a portrait is, of course, maintaining the shape of every single section within the face. And the reason why that's a challenge, at least for me, is because you're using a steel blade and it is a little bit more difficult to contort and to get things more finer. Is that a word? Anyway, this is why I love painting with the palette knife, despite the fact that you make those mistakes, despite the fact that it's challenging to get the detail. The benefit of it is that by making a quote unquote mistake, it adds a little bit more to the painting. It adds character to the painting. It adds a little bit more nuance to the character, the person that you're painting, the individual. And whilst there are challenges with this little tool, as we can see, there's also a myriad of positives. So I hope you enjoyed that process. I hope you enjoyed the discussions on art and about being more of who you are and not succumbing to being a performer. If you haven't got the idea of what that is online, I won't even describe it. Rather stick to your authentic signature, stick to your authentic way of painting. One of the things that I do enjoy when I use solely the palette knife is this constant push and pull of paint. So you'll continually be moving the different values and different shapes, and that's what I'm referring to, the push back the value, pull it forward, bring the warmer values forward. I actually love that because it gives me again the opportunity to semi-mix the tones directly on canvas. I do spend time mixing those color palettes, different colors I should say, on my palette, but certainly the other 50% is being mixed on the actual canvas. And that for me is quite enjoyable. Again, the push and pull, pushing back tones, bringing them forward with the palette knife is absolutely delicious. I do spend a lot more time painting when I use primarily the palette knife, and also you use a lot more paint. So be mindful that when you do paint with the palette knife, you will use a lot more paint, and also your artwork will take that much longer to dry as well. So if you are creating anything for prize exhibitions or commissions, just be mindful that this will take twice as long to dry before you can put any sort of varnish on top. So give it a go, use the palette knife, give portraits a go painting, or maybe just go for a pear or an apple. Again, they're really good practice items for when you're using a palette, because it'll give you the opportunity to contour and move, push and pull, paint through. But again, take it easy, take it slow, follow the technical process of painting something. In oils, you start from dark to light, and that, for me at least, is easier than working with the watercolors. But that process means that you can take your time to mix colors on your board before you paint. And because you're using oils, it won't dry on your canvas, and that means you can then paint using the wet into wet technique. I hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, guys. Bye.